Bibliophiles of the internet, my name is Adri, and today I'm here to bring you some If You Like This, Then You Should Read This recommendations, Latinx edition. Before we get into it, I feel like I should say that I use Latina, Latinx interchangeably in real life. More often I use the E endings whenever Spanish comes up in my own circles, but both words are real and good and valid, and I don't care what you think about them, whether you speak Spanish or not. So basically for this video, I'm going to be naming books that may be familiar to you, and I think a movie in one case, and then I will suggest a Latinx book that you should read if you want to read more like it. I wanted to do this video now because as the crow flies, it is Latinx Heritage Month by the time you're watching this, so let's just have fun with it and get started. First up, I want to start with a book I couldn't find a great comparison for, so I'm gonna say if you like the classic film Bend It Like Beckham, then you should read Furia by Shamila Saib Mendez. So Shamila Saib Mendez is an Argentinian-American author. This is her debut YA contemporary story set in Argentina, where the main character, Camila, is keeping a huge part of her life secret. At home, she is the ever-obedient daughter, doing her best to keep her head down, but her parents don't know that she's a powerhouse football star who dreams of going pro. Now she and her team are heading to a major tournament, but she needs her parents' permission to go. And also her childhood sweetheart, who has gone on to become an international football star himself, has come home and wants to pick off right where they left off. I do want to mention that I think a comparable YA book would be Love, Hate, and Other Filters by Samira Ahmed, which I believe touches on similar themes of following your dreams while also contending with real-world social and cultural issues, but I personally haven't read it. I wanted to find a story that was a good fit for the way that Furia uses sports as a way to dive into bigger issues tied to culture, patriarchy, and society, and ultimately that's why I chose to go with Bend It Like Beckham, which I think is a great fit in those specific ways. I love the complexity of Furia and how it honors Camila's journey to figure out not only who she is, but how she can be herself in a world that constantly tries to tell her that she has no value and that her dreams are worthless. Especially in a country where women specifically are being disappeared or killed or kept from living their lives in ways that are both commonplace and extreme, seeing her go after what she wants and refusing to make herself small is so powerful and cathartic. So if you like Bend It Like Beckham and the way it shows a young female athlete of color discovering that her talent is worth celebrating and chasing, then you should definitely read this book. Next, I'm gonna say if you like The Sound of Stars by Alicia Dow, then you should read Cia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything by Raquel Vasquez Gilliland. This author is a Mexican-American poet, author, and artist. This is her debut YA contemporary sci-fi story, and it's about Cia, whose mother was deported to Mexico after someone reported her to ICE. Cia and her family believe that her mom may have then tried to cross the Sonoran Desert on foot to get back home and likely died in the process. One evening, Cia is lighting a prayer candle in the desert for her mom when a spacecraft crashes right in front of her, and it's being piloted by her mom, who seems to be much more alive than they thought. I think this book is a great match for The Sound of Stars because they're both contemporary sci-fi stories, meaning that they're set in recognizable contemporary worlds, but they have sci-fi elements. And they also have such a thoughtfulness and tenderness and softness to them that almost defies the genre category itself. It's a story that perfectly balances romance, family, tradition, culture, spirituality, poetry, politics, and science. And like The Sound of Stars, it's really about how we can find meaning in the world around us. Next, we have a Latinx for Latinx matchup, so I'm gonna say if you like The Book of Unknown Americans by Cristina Enriquez, then you should read Dominicana by Angie Cruz. Angie Cruz describes herself as a New York-born Dominicana herself, and this is her debut historical fiction novel about Ana Cancion, a young girl who's married off to an aspiring entrepreneur so that she can move to America and then hopefully bring the rest of her family with her afterwards. As an immigrant and a young wife, she finds herself lost in New York and trapped in a loveless marriage of convenience. But when her husband has to travel back to the Dominican Republic, leaving Ana alone with his younger brother Cesar, she's able to experience a way of living in America that is both freeing and inherently different. Honestly, I read The Book of Unknown Americans a very long time ago, so I don't know how it holds up, but I think this comparison works because both books are intimate character studies trying to shed light on the experience of Latinx immigrants. The Book of Unknown Americans has these interludes that honor a wide variety of Latinx cultures, while Dominicana is more specific, but both stories explore the weight of the American dream and just how much is put on the shoulders of these two young girls. If you enjoy reading stories that take people who have been historically categorized as unimportant and makes them important by restoring their dignity and their complexity, then you should definitely read this book. Next, if you like I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown, then you should read My Time Among the Whites, Notes from an Unfinished Education by Jeanine Capot-Crusset. This is a nonfiction collection of essays in which Jeanine Capot-Crusset explores her experience of growing up in America as the daughter of Cuban refugees and how her identity as a Cuban American has been shaped by the overwhelming dominance of whiteness. I put these two books in conversation with each other because they're two of my favorite nonfiction books that explore racism and whiteness in a very specific cultural context. I enjoy nonfiction of all kinds, and I think there are so many instructional academic nonfiction books that help the reader understand race, anti-racism, white supremacy, so on and so forth, so that we can continue our journey of deconstruction. And while I enjoy, seek out, and value that kind of nonfiction, I think there's something so powerful about these memoirs told in essays that make these issues deeply personal and shows us how they impact real people in real ways. Both of these books do such a great job of showing how whiteness impacts every area of our lives in America, whether it's at home, in our language, in the education system, online, or in the workplace. These next two books are not quite a perfect match in terms of genre or demographic, but I think you'll see what I'm going for when I say that if you like The Way You Make Me Feel by Maureen Gu, then you should read American Dreamer by Adriana Herrera. Adriana Herrera is an Afro-Latinx author born and raised in the Caribbean, and this is the first book in her Dreamer series, and it follows Nestor Vasquez, an Afro-Caribbean entrepreneur and chef who owns and runs his own food truck. He's decided to take a risk and move his food truck from NYC to upstate New York, and if it doesn't work out, he will have to go back to his old day job that he cannot stand. Enter the perfect distraction, Jude Fuller, who decides to try out this hot new food spot on a whim and quickly becomes a regular customer, only he can't figure out what he likes more, Nestor's food or Nestor himself. Listen, I put these together for a very simple reason, and that's because they're both food truck romances. Again, one is YA and the other is queer adult romance, so there's a little bit of a difference in the conventions of those specific demographics, but I still think the two of them together make sense. They both have a pervasive sense of warmth, coziness, and familiarity, and they both center around characters who are learning more and more about themselves as they also learn what it means to run a business. And of course, they both feature incredible food, and they actually both celebrate Latinx food or Latinx fusion food that is described in such an enticing way, so definitely be sure to read them with a snack. Next, I want to recommend a more recent release, so if you like either The House of Spirits by Isabel Allende or Wild Beauty by A.M. Macklemore, then you should definitely pick up The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This just came out on September 7th of this year, and it's an intergenerational magical realism story following the Montoya family and their matriarch Orquídea, who can seemingly create things out of nothing with her powerful and mysterious magic. None of her children or grandchildren know where she came from, who built her house, nor where she got her magic from, but one day she sends them all invitations for her own funeral, instructing them to come home and collect their inheritance. Instead of dying, she transforms and leaves her descendants with unique magical abilities and also more questions than answers about all her deeply held secrets. I feel like Wild Beauty is a good comparison for this book because it also explores similar ideas pertaining to family curses, intergenerational curses, and how families can collectively break free from cycles of trauma. So that comparison to me makes sense. But I also couldn't stop thinking about classic Latinx magical realism stories like The House of the Spirits, which is such a slow-boiling, ornate, atmospheric story that really allows you to sit with the characters across multiple generations, which I feel like Orquídea Divina also does. And in so many ways, it feels like a modern version of that. It feels like this could be our generation's The House of the Spirits, because it takes all of those elements that are so deeply specific to Latinx magical realism, but filters it through the lens of modern-day millennials to tremendous effect. As of filming this video, I just finished this one a few days ago, and it's one of my favorite books that I've read all year. I highly recommend it. I feel like I've definitely made this next comparison before, but I'll say it again. So if you enjoy The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, then you should read The Air You Breathe by Frances de Pontes Biblos. Frances de Pontes Biblos is a Brazilian author, and this is her sophomore novel set in 1930s Brazil, and it follows two young girls, Dores and Graça, whose backgrounds are very different. Dores and her family work on the sugar plantation that belongs to Graça's family, but they still form an unlikely friendship as young girls and discover that they share the same dream of becoming famous chambistas. As they grow up together, they learn that Dores has a knack for composing music and Graça has an incredible singing voice, and eventually they run away together to try and make something of their music. I still think these two books are such a great match because they are both historical fiction novels that center around queer Latinx women who have had a taste of fame to some degree and who are retroactively telling their life story story to someone else. Granted, I will say I think that's a bigger plot point in Evelyn Hugo as compared to this book, but they are both similar in that way. And both stories are, to some extent, explorations of how fame tore these characters' lives apart and cost them many of their closest relationships. What I love about The Air You Breathe is how it understands that the people who know you the most can hurt you the most, and I love that sustained tension between Doresh and Grasa as they're falling for each other, but also realizing that both of them can never be equally famous. I feel like that's the biggest connection between these two stories, how they center characters who have had to learn the hard way that their most precious relationships and their lifestyles cannot truly coexist. And lastly, I would like to say that if you enjoy Simon vs. the Homo sapiens agenda, then you should read 1500 Miles from the Sun by Gianni Garzavia. Gianni Garzavia is of course a queer non-binary Chicane writer based in Texas, and this is their debut contemporary coming-of-age story about a high schooler named Jules who is counting down the days until he can move to California and go to college. But first he has to graduate in one piece. After partying a little too hard with his friends, his drunken self gets on Twitter and he accidentally outs himself in a tweet, which he wasn't exactly planning to do. So then he's dealing with the repercussions of that as he tries to figure out how to navigate school, his friends, his family, who are not all equally supportive, and at the same time, his hot Twitter crush slides into his DMs. Full disclosure, I am not reinventing the wheel here. Johnny themselves has said so many times that watching the Simon vs. movie was a huge motivator for them when it came to finishing the story and getting it out into the world, but it's worth repeating anyways because they're absolutely correct. Both Simon vs. and 1500 Miles are about closeted gay teenagers who are trying to figure out how they reconcile their own expression and experience of queerness both privately and publicly, and also gauging how people in their lives are going to react. Jules has to contend with that a little bit more immediately and urgently than Simon does, but both stories are ultimately about finding love and finding a path to self-acceptance. I also think, as Johnny has said themselves, that 1500 Miles is a much-needed complication of the coming-out story that's laid out in Simon, in that it addresses very specific cultural and racial barriers that queer teens of color face every single day, and that's why I love it so much. So those are just a few recommendations to start you off as we jump into Latinx Heritage Month. Let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, or if you plan on reading any of these books. But that's everything I had to recommend for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.